You're listening to Heritage Radio Network.
Hello, this is Dana Cowin, and you are listening to the Progressive Hedonist Podcast. I am so excited to share with you today my interview with Leah Thomas. You may know her better as Green Girl Leah on Instagram or as the world-famous Intersectional Environmentalist. Before we get to talk to Leah about Intersectional Environmentalist and what inspired her to share this wisdom, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about what I see as the challenges of communication. How is it if you really want to bring people together and you really want to share ideas that change the world? What is the best route? Is it fear? Is it joy? Is it just plain old information? This is something that I struggle with because the heart and soul of Progressive Hedonist is encouraging people to learn about more immediate solutions to today's long-term problems, particularly in the realm of climate and food. Leah Thomas has a phenomenal perspective on this. Leah is someone who every day is informing people with her videos on Instagram, her educational series, wherever she's doing talks. She tells people what she thinks that they need to know about climate and about what they're buying, how they're living, the better way to live a climate-friendly life. She is an activist and an advocate. And at the center of her practice is joy. That made me unbelievably happy because you know what? I think that joy should be at the center of every practice. If we wake up full of fear, which admittedly I do sometimes, or right now, more than sometimes, if I hold on to that tension through the whole day and my heart and mind is constricted by anxiety, I will do nothing wonderful in this world for my friends, for my family, and for the greater good. But if I wake up and if I punch fear in the face and I'm like, hey, actually, today we're going to do something really fun. We are going to do something joyful. We are going to show up and do our best, find pleasure with each other by doing good. There is a possibility of change, and there's the possibility of a better future for all of us. In the interview, Leah talks about how important it is when you're doing this kind of hard work to not feel that it's a drag, to not feel that you owe it to the movement to be miserable and to be broke and to be sad. You owe it to yourself and to everyone to embrace the joy when you find it and to share the wisdom when you have it. With that, I give you my conversation with the incredible, inspiring Leah Thomas. Leah, I'm so incredibly happy to have you here.
Thank you so much for having me.
I wanted to hear a little bit about your family and the educators in your family, and if that indeed is one of the reasons that today you are such a phenomenal educator on the topic of environmentalism and particularly intersectional environmentalism.
Yeah, it's kind of funny that I didn't really connect what my parents and my grandparents did to what I do now. But yeah, I come from a family of educators. So my grandmother was an elementary school teacher. My other grandmother was an elementary school teacher at the same elementary school and became the principal. Then my parents met. My dad is a tennis coach, which I feel like is an educator. My mom is an elementary school counselor, now, counsels at a school district. So I do think having folks like that around my whole life definitely influenced my love for just school, education, and maybe being a little bit of a nerd.
It's interesting because the teaching that they were doing was at an elementary level. And I do think one of your gifts is taking things that are complicated and making them super accessible. I'm curious, you took environmental studies in college.
Mm-hmm.
And what motivated you to do that? What was the light bulb before the work you're currently doing?
Yeah, it's super wild because I didn't really want to study environmental science because at the time, I wasn't super passionate about environmentalism. I was studying biology and I just didn't really like it. And then there was an environmental program that just sounded more fun. So that's what my 19-year-old college brain was thinking. And then throughout it, I started to actually really get into like not using harsh chemicals on my hair, exploring green beauty and kind of sustainable consumer facing products and going on that little college journey. Happened to be studying environmental science and started to see, oh, I guess this thing that I'm studying has to do with the lifestyle that I really want to live. And I became a park ranger when I was in college. I did 2 internships and really just fell in love with it. It really just started to make sense, especially with racial justice movements happening. And there was a big women's march when I was in college. So I think those things somehow brought me closer to environmentalism because I could see an environmental thread through all of the things. So
I guess that's seeing the pattern, right? And that, in fact, brings you to intersectional environmentalism, that it's not just one thing, it's everything. But before I get to that, I just need to hear about you as a park ranger. What attracted you to being a park ranger? I mean, obviously, it's not your full time. It didn't end up being your career, right? Like, you're not with Smokey putting out fires. But what drew you to that, even as like a summer job?
So in college, I really just I didn't want to go back home for my summer break. Not for any bad reason, but I just was like, I don't want to go to Missouri. I want to find some stuff. So I stumbled across a program that would basically pay you to work in the parks, which just sounded perfect. They pay your rent, your travel, additional food stipend, and, helping you with your student loans because it was a part of AmeriCorps.
Oh,
And, yeah, I ended up in rural Kansas my first summer in a really teeny tiny national historic site. And I would say that actually changed my life because I was interacting with farmers for the first time and, hearing some of their concerns, or I got on a combine for the first time because we didn't have many visitors. So that summer I was mostly just hanging out with the people in the community, and most of them were probably in their 70s. So just hanging out with different folks, and it was such a great time. And then the next summer, I was a park ranger at the White House Visitor Center, which a lot of people don't know the White House is also a park. That was during the last year of Obama's presidency, and I had so much fun, like hanging out with park rangers and Secret Service and helping people protest in front of the White House, and it was just such a cool time.
when you were hanging out with the farmers, I'm curious, what were they telling you?
Yeah, so I think something really interesting about the town. So Nicodemus National Historic Site, it's a historically like African American site because it's a town where freed African Americans went to kind of create their own community. So that's that beautiful history. And then surrounded by it is kind of a primarily white farming community, an extremely rural farming community. So you don't really come across a lot of towns like that of, okay, there's Black history, and then we've got a lot of America's farmers and, middle America. And I'm from Missouri, so can relate to some aspects of it. And like seeing those worlds collide. So almost like these unlikely allies side by side, the descendants of those folks and then these farmers. They were confused why I was there, which is funny. It was a really small town and just like, why would you come here? And if you're in a small town, people just start to talk. And at the time, I told them I had like dreams of working for the Environmental Protection Agency. So I remember there was one farmer who's like, okay, if you've never been on a combine, I'll show you how the wheat harvest works. And it was so cool because then he was just talking to me about how his kids, didn't want to be farmers
Yeah.
anymore and felt like the government was so far away, and it's not that they want to use pesticides, but they
Yeah.
don't want to lose money. So I think I was maybe 19 at the time, and that changed my perspective because I think if you don't interact with America's farmers, you might think, oh, they just want to pump the ground with all of these terrible things. And then you realize in lots of ways they feel like they've been forgotten about and underappreciated. So it really, really changed my life, I think.
I feel like I've learned the same lesson because my assumption about America's farmers who are using these horrible pesticides, like they don't care. How could they care and do that? And it turns out they're in such a bind. They were sold such a bad bill of goods. They're struggling. And it's very confusing for them. They love the land, right?
Mhm.
Like if they could find another way, they would find, and they can, but it will take time, money, resources, additional resources to really make that happen and make the change in America that we all actually need to see to save the soil, to replenish the earth. So tell us about your book and your work with Intersectional Environmentalist.
Yes. So during the summer of 2020, I founded Intersectional Environmentalist with my lovely co founders. And it really started as an Instagram page where we were just posting educational resources at the intersection of social issues and environmental issues. Since then, it's become its own nonprofit. And we've created hundreds of resources on the website and online. We work with content creators, and now we have a database of about 500 environmental justice orgs around the country so people can find them. And I wrote a book during the same time I was working on that project called The Intersectional Environmentalist. And really, I just felt like I had a lot to say. I thought about myself as an environmental science student and what I wish I would have read on day one, because it took me quite a while to completely get it. Like, I started getting into feminism and intersectional theory, and then separately, I was studying religion, and separately, I was learning about the carbon in the atmosphere. But I thought, whoa, what if there was a environmental justice kind of 101 resource that read like a short and sweet and accessible textbook? I felt like that would have changed my life. So I wanted to create something like that as kind of a love letter to the time, like 2020. And now I get to focus on some other projects as well. And we just hired an executive director for IE. So I'm like just on the board, and then I get to do all these other things, which just I feel a lot of gratitude for. But it's a new chapter in a lot of ways.
I'm so excited about the new chapter, but before we get to the new chapter, so tell us, what was it that you felt you would have loved to have learned on day one?
I wish I would have learned how overwhelming the amount of data is that clearly shows that certain communities are more impacted by environmental hazards, like whether you're looking at race, income, geography, etc. I think when I was studying environmental science, like I would stumble across those things occasionally, and then alarm bells in my head would kind of start raising. But I feel like it wasn't a really clear thing of, okay, this is how housing inequality connects to the placement of people, and segregation that connects to this. So yes, you are indeed seeing this demographic of people being closer to toxic waste sites and facilities. And yes, this is connected to racism or wealth inequality, etc. I really wish I would have had that kind of information, and it didn't even need to be shared in a scary way, but
Mhm.
just for, I mean, it's scary, but to tell students like, yes, you will find this in the data.
Right. I think that you get a much more complete picture, right? Because nothing, literally nothing happens in a vacuum. I'm curious, the resources, like what are the key resources that you discovered that you think are really helpful for people to know about?
Ooh, so I would say if they want to get really nerdy, there's Dr. Robert Bullard, who's nicknamed the father of environmental justice, and he tells me quite a bit. He's like, I know you've written one book, but I've written like 17. So he has 17 books. I don't know if I'm gonna get there, but he has so many books about systemic inequality and toxic waste and environmental justice. So if someone really wants to get into the nitty gritty, there's such a wealth of knowledge and research with people like him. And then another thing I would just encourage people to do is like find your local environmental equity organization. So whether it's someone that's addressing food injustice in your community, like there's a Compton Community Garden nearby and a lovely store called Supermarket, which you should check out if you don't know them. They're so
I
great.
don't. I'm like, ooh.
They're so amazing. And I think if you don't do a second, just say, okay, who are the people that are tackling this issue? Because I can't be the only person that's seeing it. It's actually also really affirming because then okay, people are trying, and then they just need resources, amplification, and support. So figure out who those people are, figure out the local issues, and like start locally. Maybe even just pick one issue, whether it's working with garment workers or food justice or water, etc., and don't overwhelm yourself with all of them at once.
I love how you said, there's someone who's written 17 books on this topic. It reminds me of how you brought to light people who've been forgotten, right? There are a lot of people who've done this work in the past who've been overlooked because they're Black or brown people. And I would just love for you to tell us a little bit about them. There's some great stories.
Yeah, there's so many, and I'm glad you mentioned that. But some people I really adore would be Hazel M. Johnson. So she's nicknamed the mother of environmental justice. And she was just this woman from Chicago who basically conducted her own study to figure out there were more instances of a particular cancer in her community. And she worked with the church to figure it out. So I thought that was so cool that there was this kind of coalition of religious folks that were saying, okay, there's something called a toxic donut, as she defined it. And communities basically being surrounded by like a circle of toxins and things. So she's somebody. And then if you're looking for someone in the outdoor space, there's someone named Teresa Baker who is incredible. She started something called the Outdoor CEO Diversity Pledge, I believe. And that is what inspired me to create an intersectional environmentalist pledge. But she basically got all these people in the outdoor industry to make a commitment to diversity and inclusion. So she's just such a rock star. And then, I mean, there's all the folks like Dr. Ray Wynn Grant is one of my favorite people ever, like a Black woman, Black bear biologist. Please read her book. She's so cool. And yeah, just so many people out there.
I'd love to hear about Earth Sessions and your community gathering. Yeah, tell us about the most recent one. I know there was one in LA, there was one in New York.
Yeah, so I just love the revolutionary art of gathering.
Why do you think that gathering is a revolutionary art?
When people just start talking to each other, and I think when IE started, it was during the pandemic. So social media engagement was at an all-time high, and everybody was watching Instagram lives, and we just had to be online. And then I think after 2 years, I started feeling the impacts of loneliness, and I just felt like I was more socially awkward and anxious than ever. And I don't know, being inside so much, it really did something to me, and I think, all of us, and I think it forced, gathering spaces to be a bit more intentional because I started to love my solitude in a lot of ways and getting to be my, quirky self at home, but when I was around people, it always felt, like, extra intentional, like, if I'm leaving the comfort of my house, there's a reason for
Yeah.
this, and I think a lot of folks feel the same way. I think Earth Sessions began in 2020 because I thought, I love music, a great way for people to connect. I think there's a lot of artists who aren't your traditional, like I love Coldplay, but not everybody listens to Coldplay. So R&B artists, hip hop artists, alternative artists, like how can I work with those folks and bring in their community to have different conversations about environmentalism? It's been so great. Like our last event at New York Climate Week, we did a survey that 60% of people this was their first climate event ever.
That's
Yeah.
so fantastic to open that many people's minds to climate and fun, right? Like the
Mhm.
two of them can go together.
Yeah, and then making it a really positive experience. I our last event, I love stage design and theatrics. I was also a theater kid, so we had, vintage parachutes hanging from the ceiling and clouds, and it was like purple and pink inside, and it just felt like you were walking into the world that you wanted to be in. So that's what I really love to create with these spaces. So you walk in and immediately people are like, "Do you want a free book?" And then there's just a books
Great.
because I remember the joy of going to a bookstore and someone saying, "Oh, I don't actually have to pay for like I can just take the book and oh, there's food and there's all these different people." And there's a guy who got on the microphone to give feedback and he was like, "I didn't think I was in the right place because some people are a little artsy, but you know what? I think I actually have hope now." And it was just the cutest
Oh, that's
experience.
so sweet. So who are some of the artists and poets that you brought together?
Yeah, so a lot of them are kind of alternative R&B artists, which is very niche, but we did an event with someone named Ravina, Umi. We had a hip hop duo called Earth Gang. They are so cool because They have a community garden in Atlanta. They're very still hip hop artists, but the earth kind of flows through all their work, and they're pretty big. We've also had some folks like Jamila Woods, who's a very incredible R&B singer, and then we also work with a string quartet called Gaia, and they do renditions of popular music. So we have them at a couple events, and people really just love hearing them do their favorite songs as a quartet.
This episode is brought to you by Visit Ithaca, where great minds meet the great outdoors. Check them out at visitithaca.com. Ithaca is known for outstanding dining and local cider, wine, and beer. And here's a quick word from one of these great local businesses.
My name is Steve Seelan from South Hill Cider. So I started making cider about 20 years ago, and I made cider exclusively from wild apples for the first 10 years. And then around 2014, I decided to plant some actual cider apples in an orchard to start cider production just like a small winery. We have a tasting room. You can see the orchard, you can see the valley, and we pour tastings of our ciders. We have about 20 different ciders that we make. So there are beautiful hiking trails and gorges and waterfalls all over this area. And in fact, we're located right on the Finger Lakes Trail, where in 15 minutes you can walk down to a 140-foot waterfall that's on a land trust property.
If you're looking for a weekend away, you can't do much better than Ithaca. Check out visitithaca.com for more information and get to where great minds meet the great outdoors.
You've talked about joy as activism. You talk about your ancestors and the joy that they had in the face of great obstacles. What does joy and activism mean to you?
I feel like I am this way because, like everybody, I'm a human navigating this world and have experienced grief and heartbreak, and even just being in the climate space, seeing kind of like unimaginable tragedies, and working in the environmental media space, like at one point, just getting bombarded with these sad stories. And I think over time, I don't know, like even if I go to a coffee shop, it's like I really want to just smile at people because smiling is just contagious, and like sharing a brief moment of warmth with someone, because I think what grief has taught me is that if I'm experiencing this, then I could just be walking around and someone could be carrying this, or like 10 times worse than what I've ever experienced. So like whenever we can find joy, let's cling on to it. And I think I wanted to counter the narrative that environmental activism, or activism in general, needs to be something that drains and depletes you, and you need to live in this like scarcity mindset, or you're not an activist if you're happy, or if you also are a content creator, or if you're this or you're that. You need to be this thing that basically is living a life of like deprivation, which is really, really sad. And I think I just want to show people, and that's why I can be a bit theatrical sometimes, but I just want to show people that there's another way. Like you can be really passionate about the things you care about and also find time for joy and rest. And finding joy, I feel, is how I practice activism nowadays.
You mentioned rest a couple of times. I'm curious because you must be, and I am as well, bombarded by the world's on fire. And it is on fire. We're not denying it. What do you do just for yourself? I know you're a potter. Is that part of the practice to keep yourself sane and above water? Like, how do you deal with being bombarded with all the true and very scary environmental news?
Yeah, I started ceramics earlier this year, and I always just like finding like crafty projects and kind of getting in touch with my inner child and play and those sorts of things, and things that have nothing to do with environmentalism. And it's just something that makes me happy. So I also have to set boundaries, which is hard for me as a person that like wants to say yes to everything, but really thinking about like, okay, what's going to bring me joy? And sometimes it's like, okay, if I get an email from a random high school student who just wants to talk, I'm like, you know what? I think I can do that. Maybe twice a month. Like I want to do that. That actually really replenishes me.
It's a balance. One reason that I think you're an inspiring environmentalist is that you don't see it as good and evil. Like you see us as imperfect people. When you accept that people are imperfect, what are the boundaries of that? Because in fact, imperfection could lead you to sort of pretty bad behavior
Oh, yeah.
over time or forgiving bad behavior. And yet simultaneously, we are imperfect. There is no perfect. So
Mhm.
how do you think about that?
That's a good question. Yeah. I feel like imperfection is not an excuse for lack of accountability and self reflection and self awareness. I feel like over the last couple of years, especially with social media, I've seen people just harass like activists and even content creators I know or educators. And it started to feel like it got out of hand. Like I read an article the other day that was like, the Angela Davis can't be trusted. And I was like, what is happening? Like, why would you ever say that? And I was reading these thought pieces on people that I love, like Bell Hooks,
Mhm.
and it just was getting really odd to me, and I just like, these people are imperfect. Like, Bell Hooks maybe said something that you didn't, agree with, or you feel like she's, catering to men too much, and it's okay for us to actually have different theories of change. So I think that's something that I've been exploring lately, like, okay, someone might have a different theory of how to get this particular thing done, but it doesn't
Mhm.
mean that they're, like, horrible and we have to,
Yeah.
discredit everything. So there's that, and then also, like, holding people accountable. So when you know better, do better. So, if today like, if you had to buy something on Amazon, like, I'm not the type of person that's going to just like, "You're a terrible human being," but I'm like, "Okay, if you are getting something on Amazon, here are some of the eco-friendly,
Yeah.
options or small businesses that you can support." And then
Yeah.
maybe the next step is, "Okay, here's another store that's close by." So if you have time, because maybe you're working a really long work week and you're trying to do the right thing, like, just showing people different pathways and things that they can build on. So it's not saying, like, "You're imperfect, stop there." It's saying,
Mhm.
"You're imperfect. Okay, you're doing the best that you can. If you'd like to add on to this, like, here's the next step and what you can do."
Yeah, it does seem like shame and fear are generally just, not motivators, right? It's like if someone makes me feel bad, I'm just going to go slink in the corner and hide. I'm not going to go out and do the next better thing.
Mhm. I just hope people know, people in movements are normal human beings. Like, someone told me, like, "Greta is funny. She's a funny person. She's a silly person." And I hope, through social media, maybe folks can also start seeing the people that they look up to as just full-on human beings with different parts of themselves, and maybe they'll stop being as hard on themselves if they understand that the people they look up to are also imperfect.
It's an excellent point. And you talked about sustainable fashion as well. And I know you like secondhand clothes, but you also, I thought, made a really fascinating point about how, as vintage or secondhand has become more popular, it's actually priced out a community that really was thrifting to look great, feel great. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, that makes me sad, especially as someone that grew up going to thrift stores because I kinda had to, and I remember, like, spending so much time and then finally finding at the time, it was, like, Juicy Couture tracksuits, and I remember I went to Goodwill and I found a Juicy tracksuit after, like, 30 minutes, and that meant a lot to me because I couldn't normally afford it. So that's hard because there needs to be accessible options and these kind of online resellers. There's a lot of people that get stuff in bulk, sell it online, mark it up. So it's kind of being nicknamed the gentrification of thrifting. So that's
Mhm.
something I hope goes away, or that we can support, initiatives or different thrift stores that are in specific communities and like protect them from that. But I honestly don't know how. So that's something that I'd love to investigate, but that definitely is happening.
Yeah, and it's a very good question. Like, how could those places be protected? So, if you're going to put together your dream meal, healthy for the planet and healthy for you, what would that meal be?
I have a fixation on like what is like poppy seed dressing, like salad
Mhm.
dressing. Just delicious, amazing. So probably a beautiful salad. I also love kale. This is all from the farmers market, all from local farmers. Yeah, I mean honestly it would just be a delicious salad with fruits and veggies and things that are in season from local farmers with a ton of delicious poppy seed dressing.
What's next for you? I mean, Earth Sessions is a piece of it, but I think you have a book that you're working on right now.
Yeah, so I'm finally done with the book proposal. So hopefully we'll have good news sometime soon. But this book is all about women in the environment specifically. And just exploring the intertwined relationship between women and the planet, while also, questioning the binary at the same time and knowing that some things don't necessarily fit perfectly, but it's kind of a call to action for women specifically.
When you think about women in the environment, what is different about a woman working with the environment?
Yeah, I think the funnest part of the book, so this isn't naming anyone of modern day, but I got to research a lot of mythology to kind of just understand, like, why do we have this association anyway? And there's so many cultures that have these like earth mother goddess figures, which was just so fun seeing how that has really made this strong association between women and the planet. And it's not just about women traditionally, sometimes bringing children into this world.
And what about the non-binary part of it?
Yeah, I think anyone can mother is what I found. Like, anyone could be a nurturer. So that's something that I really want to flow throughout the book. Because maybe back in the day, things were very, very gendered. Like, if you are a woman, you do this, you are nurturing, you blah, 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 blah. And that flows through, stereotypes that we see today. So I just want to remind people that, nurturing and mothering don't necessarily need to exist along a gender binary.
I have found that people in climate have a word. It is their North Star.
Mm-hmm.
So for someone like Isaiah Hernandez, it's curiosity. For someone like Ayanna Elizabeth Johnson, the word is possibilities. What is your beacon that is your motivator and the idea that you would like to leave people with?
Oh, it's such a good question. One of my favorite words is just serendipity, because you really never know. Like for me, I didn't expect to go to Kansas and get on a combine or work at Patagonia and do all these things, but that's why I feel like I am the way that I am, and I feel really fulfilled in the work that I do. So I want people to just kind of trust the journey, and when doors close, know that they might open elsewhere. And, the future is just very serendipitous. So just live and see what happens, because hopefully it'll be pretty good. And when it's not, I think it'll come back around to being pretty good.
And that's what I would call being an optimist. So on that note, I want to say thank you so much for joining me on this podcast today. I love talking to you and can't wait to continue the conversation, not even in front of a mic. Hey, if you enjoyed that conversation, which of course I hope you did, check me out on Instagram, where we have some extra content, and subscribe wherever you can subscribe for podcasts, and leave those little stars. It's something that I never like to talk about, but other people do. And I want people to be able to hear this podcast and spread the word, which is how we're going to make a better future together. And it really helps us out. So thanks for listening. Thanks for being a great listener, because you got this far. And have a great day.